Hey guys, my name is Michelle and in this video it is time to do my August and September wrap up. Because I didn't do a separate reading wrap up for August, it's now going into this one as well. So it's just going to be one big wrap up of all the books that I've read in the past 2 months. There aren't that many, that is also the reason why I didn't really do an August one. I was in a filming slump, I was in a reading slump, but the time has come to start doing wrap ups again because in total I do have quite some books to talk about. And yeah, I'm excited to do that. There are some that are rereads, there are some that are very good new reads, there are also a couple of books that I'm not exactly sure about. All in all, it has been an interesting couple of weeks when it comes to reading, but I'm definitely ready to read more in the last months of the year. But anyway, that's for another video. Yeah, I am going to do my August and September reading wrap up. So the first 2 books that I finished were 2 rereads and they were both audiobooks, and those were The Kite Runner and 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I'm going to review these 2 books together because, to be honest, my thoughts are pretty much the same for both of them, and also they were rereads. I don't have a whole lot of new thoughts about them, but anyway, both of these books take place in Afghanistan and follow certain characters throughout their lives throughout the war and things that are happening. Kite Runner follows a boy named Amir, who is the son of a very rich businessman in Afghanistan and who is best friends with the son of their servants. But one day something very terrible happens which kind of breaks up their friendship. And then 1,000 Splendid Suns is from a female perspective, and it follows 2 women named Mariam and Laila, who both struggle with a lot of problems throughout the years. I know that is kind of vague, but when it comes to that book I really don't want to say too much because I feel like it's so much better experienced when you don't know anything and you just follow through their stories with them. Anyway, both of these books are amazing. Amazing writing style, beautiful, emotional stories. You really just feel it. You're with these characters. I love that it takes place over longer time periods. Like, you can really see those characters growing up and going through a lot of stuff. And that is also why I reread these books, because I love them so much. I've read them multiple times before. I think 1,000 Splendid Suns is my favorite because it is of the female perspective, which just rings a bit more with me personally. So yeah, beautiful books, and I think they are, I think The Kite Runner is 4 stars or 4.5 stars, and 1,000 Splendid Suns is definitely a 5-star read. By the way, if the lighting is very inconsistent in this video, the lighting outside is very inconsistent, so there's not much I can do about it. But the next book that I read is Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. I finally picked up the next book in the Farser trilogy. And yeah, this is about a boy named Fitz, who is the bastard son of the crown prince of the 6 duchies, which is this kingdom. Being the bastard son, nobody really knows what to do with him, so he ends up becoming trained to become an assassin, a royal assassin. That is the premise of the first book in the series, but this is the second book in the series, and I think it goes without saying that apart from that premise, so much more is happening, especially with this second book. Like, things go crazy. I'm very happy that I finally continued with this book series and that I read the next book because it was so much fun. It was amazing. Lots of twists and turns, lots of character moments, lots of promise for future books, or at least one future book in this particular story. You can tell how much the world building of the first book comes back and really rewards you as a reader in the second book, because it is such a rich world, so many characters, it feels so lifelike. Robin Hobb is an amazing author. I love her writing style and just this entire world, and I think it's so masterfully done. Yeah, I very much enjoyed this book. The only thing I will say, it is a high fantasy book, so it wasn't a fast read. It definitely took me a couple of weeks to read this book, and it's kind of, there were some bits that I just could not put it down, and then there were other bits where I was not bored, that's not the right word, but where I had more of a struggle getting through certain parts because there's so much that is happening. It is definitely high fantasy. Sometimes that is just the case. I will also add again that I was in quite a reading slump, so maybe this wasn't the best book to read during that period, arguably. But yeah, it was amazing, and I cannot wait to see what happens next, but at the same time I'm also kind of dreading, well, that's not the right word, but I sort of feel hesitant picking up the third book because I know that these books, they take some time, and I know that probably shouldn't hold me back because what does it matter when you have a couple of weeks where you only read one book. Like I feel sometimes I put a bit of pressure on myself to read more quickly and to read more books. But yeah, I think it is such a beautiful book. I cannot wait to see what is going to happen next in all of the other Robin Hobb series. I'm in for a lot more books and a lot more adventures, that much is true. And yeah, I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is False Witness by Karen Slaughter, the latest Karen Slaughter release. This book is about two sisters named Lee and Kelly, who 20 years ago did something very horrible, and now in present day it is coming back to haunt them. This book is very much about the psychological aspect of that, like the twists and turns in their minds and how they feel so afraid on being caught out on what they have done and what it will mean for their lives. Which is a bit different than other Karen Slaughter books, because usually there is a whole lot more like graphic stuff happening and like brutal crimes and things like that. And don't get me wrong, there's still a whole lot of brutal stuff happening in this book as well, especially in the first chapter already. But I feel like it's a bit more of a mind book, if that makes sense. Anyway, I love Karen Slaughter, I love her thrillers, they're always very tension-filled and suspenseful. With this book, I thought it was entertaining, I thought it was perfectly fine, that is the thing. It didn't stand out to me in any way, there was nothing that made me go like, oh my god, such an amazing book. But at the same time, there also weren't many things that made me hate it or dislike it. I think this book is just the perfect example of entertaining, enjoyable, nothing much wrong with it. I actually ended up listening to the audiobook because, as I mentioned before, reading slump. And when I'm in a reading slump, I'm better with audiobooks than with physical books. The audiobook was pretty great, so that is a recommendation if you want to read it. I have one thing that did annoy me quite a bit about this book, and that is it takes place in present day. So it also takes place during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I was so annoyed with all the references to people wearing masks and like everything that has to do with COVID. Like, it annoyed me so much. Not the thing on its own, like I understand all the regulations and things that are happening in the pandemic, but I hated that it was so present in this book, because in the end, I felt like it didn't really add anything to the story. It was just there to be like, look, the pandemic is here as well, so it is realistic. And when I read a book, I actually don't want to read about that, because I'm reading a book. I want some escapism. I don't want to be reminded about all the things that we have to do in a book as well. Like, I know those things, I do those things. So having those constant reminders and things that were referencing the situation, it just annoyed me so much. But luckily, after the first couple of chapters, the references were definitely not as much anymore, so we could focus more on the actual story. But I don't need it. I don't need my free time books that I read for fun to include all those COVID-19 references as well, because that's not why I read a Karen Slaughter book. I want the murder and the crime and everything. And I still got that, so still enjoyable. And I think it's probably a personal preference, because I'm sure there are people who love that it's so realistic and in our real world with real problems. But at the same time, I'm not one of those people, so it did annoy me. But apart from that, perfectly fine book, nice. Nothing much to say about it. So next I read a book on my e-reader, and that one was Influencer: Building Your Personal Brand in the Age of Social Media by Brittany Hennessy. So I picked this book up because I was like, you know, being an influencer, having a book about that, that sounds interesting and probably useful to me, because, well, influencer sounds a bit weird to me, but I am active on social media and on YouTube. And this book promised to tell you about being an influencer and about everything that goes on behind the scenes and all the business aspects of it. And I was very interested in that concept. In the end, I had some mixed feelings about this, because on the one hand, yes, there were some interesting insights in the influencer world. Mostly things that I didn't really know yet. Like, some things, of course, I did know, but especially when it comes to the business aspect of it and how much being an influencer is actual work and not just, you know, taking some fun pictures and being done with it. I really love to read about that. Like, this book definitely made it very clear that you should not underestimate that. But then on the other hand, I felt like this book had some very weird pieces of advice that I didn't really agree with. Mostly things like the advice of when you do a sponsorship, then you should deliver more than you're being paid for, because the company will like that and you will be on their radar for more partnerships. And I was like, but I don't think that everybody should be doing more than what they're paid for, because then you're just doing much more work for not enough money. Like, I don't think that is good advice, because I think it's more important to know your worth and actually getting paid that. There were also things like that as an influencer, you should always answer your email immediately, because you will miss out on opportunities, which just reading about it already gave me stress. So basically what I want to say is that there was a lot of advice that said, work as hard as you can, don't take any breaks, don't relax, just work until you're broken, and do more, work harder. And I don't think that is the best advice. I think it leads to a lot of bad mental health. Also, this book was very much focused on beauty influencers, and especially women. So it was not as universal as I would have liked it to be. I still think there are some interesting tips and tricks in there, and I think it's interesting to know about this business, because even though I don't agree with all those tips, unfortunately I think that they're often very true, that the influencer business is really harsh and really demanding. And yeah, it was interesting, but yeah, mixed feelings. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Maybe a bit less would be more suitable. Not really sure about this whole book, to be honest. Then I also read a Dutch book by a Dutch author, and that is Goed Werk by Cynthia Schultz, which is a book that means good work. I can be very short about this one, because it's mostly about structuring your work and your life, and having less stress, a better mental health, a better, happier life, to be honest. It's about how to plan a structure, and it is very straightforward, very useful, and very practical. I learned a lot from this book. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, because I think it was such a good combination of having some stories, some examples, but also being very straightforward and not too long, not too complicated. Just like, you can really do something with this, which I liked very much. So yeah, also an ebook that I read, and I really enjoyed this one. And then the last 3 books were again rereads, and I can be very short with these ones. I'm not going to talk about them really, but those were the first 3 Harry Potter books: Philosopher's Stone, Chamber of Secrets, and Prisoner of Azkaban. You probably know my opinions on the Harry Potter books. I have videos about them. If you want to hear more about it, read those. Yeah, I was listening to the audiobooks again, because it really calms me, and I felt like I needed that mentally. So yeah, I also read those. And that was it for my August and September reading wrap up. It was quite a weird reading period in my life, to be honest. Kind of all over the place, more non-fiction, some rereads, some good new books, but to be honest, just I was in a very weird headspace when it comes to reading, but yeah, it is what it is. And I still very much hope that you enjoyed this video and these reviews, and that maybe they are useful to you, who knows. Please leave me in comments and tell me about what you have read this month, or if you want to read something, just leave me a comment, tell me about whatever you want to tell me. I always love to read it. You can always subscribe to my channel if you want to see more bookish content, and yeah. Hopefully I will see you again in my next video very soon. And until then, bye!